Welcome back. I am on page 17 and we are looking at a model, a diagram of the water cycle. The source of this image is 101 Clip Art. This is online. I searched for free images and this is what I came up with. And I have to be honest with you, I think I have never ever taken a science test that did not have something about the water cycle. This is such a very common thing to see on a test. So I wanted to go over this with you and talk about what all these terms mean. So first of all, when you look at this picture, you see some very familiar things. You see a sunshine, the clouds, an ocean, a lake. There is grass, there's a river, there are mountains. So these are things that are familiar to me. They even drew me some birds over here because they know I like the ocean. We also need to look at the words and the things that we don't understand. So the word clouds, I'm betting that all of you know. I bet all of you know lake and ocean, and you know what water is, and you know what the ground is. River, you know. Some of you definitely know what plants are. You may know what glacier is. If not, I'm going to tell you. But there are some big words here that you may not know, like sublimation, precipitation, transpiration, condensation, evaporation. Those are the words that we need to make sure we know. Runoff, soil surface. So we sort of have a mix here of words that we do know and words that we may not know, but we're going to break them down. I am going to take away all those circles because that bothers me. I don't know if it bothers you, but let's take a look here at our water cycle. The other thing I need you to notice would be the arrows, because arrows are important. If you have a diagram that has arrows, you need to pay attention to them because that helps you follow a timeline or a sequence. So I'm going to start my discussion of the water cycle with evaporation. So I'm going to say step 1 is evaporation. And we have a morpheme in here. So before we even go any further, I want to highlight my morpheme. And it is vapor or vapo. I'm just going to put vapo. Now you may know someone who uses the electronic cigarettes. They're vaping. This is another use of that morpheme, vapo. So let's go over. I don't think we've already recorded it, but let me be sure. I'm not putting, I have. Vapor is gas. So I know that evaporation has something to do with gas. And since we're talking about the water cycle, that's going to be steam or water vapor. This is the process where a liquid turns into, it's still water, but it's changing state. So liquid becomes gas. That's what evaporation means. This is what happens if you put out a bucket of water in the sun and you go back 10 hours later. That water may be gone because that liquid has become gas. It has absorbed into the atmosphere. So there are 2 ways that this can happen, and let's see if we can figure that out. Here is one of them. Well, the word evaporation is right there. And you notice that the arrows with evaporation are doing what? They're moving up. So it's happening here, It's happening here. Those are evaporations. Where else is it happening? Well, right there is one of them, plants and transpiration. And then sublimation, the arrow is going up there. So I can assume that all of those are related. That transpiration, which involves plants, and sublimation, that's where solid turns to gas without happening through a liquid phase. But all of those are forms of moving up. Water is evaporating in this step. It is an upward movement. So then let's move to step 2, where we have condensation. And condense literally means to thicken up. This happens when temperatures cool down. So in cooler areas, what's happening is that the vapor, the gas, moves back to liquid. It thickens up to make clouds. And then it's thickening up in that cooler air. It's getting heavier. It's turning back into liquid. So that's happening where? Where is condensation occurring? Well, it's right here. It's in the clouds. So if the test question asks you where does condensation occur, you could say in the clouds. So the clouds form over the oceans and the lakes and then follow the arrows. They're moving over land where things are warming up again. We're moving back into a warmer environment. So as they move over, look at what happens to the clouds. They're turning darker. And we know what happens when darkness comes. What happens if it gets dark during the day at your house? Rain or snow. And that's the third step of the water cycle. It's the precipitation phase. And you notice that the arrows start moving down here. We had the arrows moving up and then across, and now they're coming down. And this is step 3, precipitation. And there are 4 forms of precipitation, and I'm sure you have heard of them. You have rain. If it's cold, you're going to have snow or sleet. It's a mixture of rain and snow. And in thunderstorms, sometimes you have the little balls of ice called hail. So those are your 4 forms of precipitation. So that those clouds move over the mountains, over the land, and that precipitation falls. So once it hits the ground, where does it go? Well, it runs off the mountains, it runs into rivers, and it starts running back toward the lake. And that is step 4. That's the runoff, where precipitation falls and then that water returns to the lakes or the oceans. So this is a return to a lake or an ocean. And then once it gets back to lake or ocean, that process starts all over again. So you also get water coming from plants in the form of transpiration. It just evaporates up out of the plants. You have groundwater and water in the soil that finds its way back to oceans and lakes so that it can be absorbed again. So those are the 4 steps of the water cycle. And I do want to give you the definition of a glacier. It's not part of the water cycle necessarily, but it is a term you should know. It's almost like a river of ice. It is a large moving current of ice. So in very cold areas, you see glaciers. They're moving down mountains usually. They're sliding very slowly, and they melt. As they move across the earth, there's friction. Also, as they move down into warmer areas, that water also runs off and back to oceans and lakes. Just an overview, so that if you see this process on your test, you will know what that means, or at least have an idea of how the water cycle works. Okay, I will see you in the next video for more definitions.